I'm Chef Julia Dunaway, and today I'm going to be making some nut and grain pancakes from my breakfast ebook and breakfast cookbook. So the nut and grain pancakes, if you saw them, you would think they look like the Harvest nut and grain pancakes. I hear now they used to have them at IHOP, International House of Pancakes. They don't have them anymore from what I heard, but I used to get them all the time and they were so good. They were like this nutty whole wheat pancake and you put the syrup on them and they were so hearty, and they weren't just like, white flour, thin, nothing pancakes. They had, they're like hippie things. Like I like those things with granola and nuts and seeds, but they had a lot of body to them. So I wanted to try to figure out how to make these Harvest nut and grain pancakes, but make them whole food, plant-based, oil-free. So I messed around and I kind of came up with a recipe, and that's what we're going to make today. But before we do that, we need to get our flax seeds activated. So I've got a little bowl here, and ground flax seeds are really useful as a thickening agent, kind of how people used to use eggs until they were plant-based. So instead of eggs, we'll take 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed and add 6 tablespoons of water, because 1 tablespoon of ground flax seeds and 3 tablespoons of water ends up making something similar to like what you would use an egg for. So I use that a lot in cakes and batters like cornbread and whatever. But what you have to do is you have to let it sit around for a few minutes, because you could see right now it's just like water. But after it sits here for a few minutes, it will kind of turn into a gel. So we want to do that. Then we're going to measure out our flour. So I have my whole wheat pastry flour here in this bowl, and it's very, standard, ordinary Bob's Red Mill whole wheat pastry flour. And it's easy to find now. For a while, it was not available during COVID. I think they had a shortage. You wouldn't find it in the store, and people would always say, don't use that, we can't find it. But now I think you can find it. So what I like to do is measure my flour out by scooping it into the cup and then leveling it off. And why that's important is that's a lot lighter. You'd be surprised, that's a lot lighter than digging it into the flour. So little things make a lot of difference when you're making things with flour, like batters. It doesn't take much to activate the gluten in your baked goods or batters, and that's what makes things tough instead of light and airy. So we want to make it light and airy, right? You don't want rubbery, tough pancakes. And that was one of the problems that I used to see in making whole food plant-based baked goods, is the texture was not very good. It wasn't very, I don't know, it just not light enough. Okay, so now we're going to add, speaking of lightening things, baking powder and baking soda. So I've got good old baking powder. We're going to add 1.5 teaspoons of that. 1.5. And then with our baking soda, we're going to add just 1/2 teaspoon. That's not much. I'm not a big fan of baking soda because sometimes the baking soda doesn't get mixed up well. So I'm kind of spreading it around my batter, my flour. And then you end up with some like bitter pocket of baking soda, and it tastes terrible. So let's see. And then we're going to put some walnuts in here, 1/4 cup of finely chopped walnuts. Since what I did was I threw my walnuts into the food processor a little while ago and kind of chopped them really finely in the food processor. They're not ground, but they're diced very small. So that's 1/4 cup. You can put more in if you like it more walnutty, but I like to kind of put some of those walnuts on the top when I get the pancakes on the griddle, because then it'll have that little layer of crunchy walnuts on the top. Okay, so we have our flour and we have our baking powder, baking soda. I didn't put any salt in. So I think that's probably something in my recipe that I can improve. So I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and I'm going to put it in my new recipe because I think that actually would make it taste better. And I'm going to really make sure I mix this well. I have a whisk. And back in the old days, we used to sift things with a sifter. And that's kind of grandma's way. Nobody really does that much anymore, except probably grandma. But there was a reason for that, because that would mix all these flours and the bitter baking soda, baking powder, and all that stuff. It would mix it together really well. Because you'd be surprised how, if you have a pocket of baking soda, how bad that tastes. Okay. So then I have my plant milk, which is almond milk. I'm using this Califia Farms almond milk. I really prefer Malk almond milk because it doesn't have so many ingredients in it, but I can't find it anywhere. It's like, it just doesn't exist at the supermarket anymore. So I'm looking for it all the time. It's MALK. So for now, I'm using the one I've been using, 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar. Put that in there, and this kind of activates it and turns into baking, or it turns into like buttermilk. So we're going to add the rest of our wet ingredients into this milk concoction. So we're going to put some vanilla in. That gives it a nice little flavor, just a teaspoon. And we can sweeten it up a little bit. So we'll sweeten it up by adding a couple of tablespoons of sugar. I'm going to use date sugar, but because date sugar doesn't really melt in liquid that well, because it's just kind of dehydrated dates, I'm going to put the date sugar in with the dry ingredients. Because I used to use cane sugar and turbinado sugar and sugars that melted. So I would put it in the wet ingredients, but since I switched to date sugar, I'm going to put it in with the dry ingredients. And it will, once it gets all the moisture and everything, it will, kind of mix in well, but it won't really melt like sugar. Okay, so I have all of my ingredients, and all I have to do is mix them together. And then we can start cooking our pancakes. That's simple. That's such a simple recipe. And as this almond milk sits here with the apple cider vinegar, it kind of curdles, not really curdles, but it changes the consistency of that almond milk. And then we have our flaxseed. Don't forget our flaxseed. See, in that little bit of time, it kind of gelled. It's not just a thin liquid. Now it's kind of got the consistency of a little bit more of a thickener. I've had my griddle heating at about 350 to 375 because you don't want to do this on a cold griddle. And we don't use oil. So that means we don't grease up the griddle. So that's going to be interesting when we put it on this griddle, and we don't want it to stick. So we have to see, what's going to happen. Hopefully it will work like it does when I'm making it, which it doesn't stick. But my experience sometimes in doing cooking videos is I'll be doing something perfectly on my own in my kitchen, and then I think, oh, I'm going to show everybody how to make this. And then when I do it in front of the camera, it goes wrong. Why does that happen? But it does. Okay. And the longer the batter sits, the more it will start to firm up. So I'm going to put about 1/3 cup of batter, and it should sizzle, because if you put this on a cold griddle, it's not going to be a good result. Okay. And I'm spreading it out a little bit so it's not too thick. And I'm using 1/3 cup. You can make them bigger. You can make them smaller, but this seems to be about the right size. I'll make 4 of them. So how much fun would this be on Sunday morning? I used to make pancakes for my kids, just like my mother did for me. My mother always made us pancakes on special days, on Sundays, on weekends. Okay, remember I said I'm going to put a little bit of my walnuts on the top, just so there's a little crunch. I think that makes it good. But on Saturday, whoops, a little bit too much. On Saturday mornings or Sunday mornings, my mother would get out the remember when, well, if you're not my age, you might not remember this, but when I was growing up, we had, packages of pancake mix, and you had to add milk and water to them, and they were pretty good. And so my mother would get out the pancake mix, and she would make up a big bowl of batter. And then my mother was very artistic. Oh, it's hot in my kitchen. My mother was very artistic. So she would make designs of the pancakes, and she would turn them into animals, hearts, flowers. And you could just tell her, she would say, what do you want me to make? And you would just name something, and she would make the pancake in the shape of whatever it was you said you wanted. So we loved that. We had so much fun. So when my kids were little, I would do the same thing for them. I would say, okay, let's have pancakes. And I'm not very artistic, so mine were not anywhere near as good as my mother's, but I still tried and my kids loved it and we had a lot of fun. Well, now that I'm whole food plant-based, I tried all these different kind of pancakes. I'm going to check on my pancakes to see how they're doing. Oh, they're getting it to be a nice color. And remember with pancakes, how you can tell when they're ready to flip over in traditional pancakes is usually you see a lot of bubbles on top. So we just have to kind of watch them. We don't want to turn them over when they're still raw, because you know what happens if you turn the pancakes over before they're ready to turn over is they'll be all, you know, soft and they'll fall apart. So we have to be patient. We don't want to jump the gun. But anyway, back to whole food plant-based pancakes, I would think, oh, I'm going to make pancakes with oat flour. And then I would put together oat flour and almond milk and flax seeds. And it would be just, it wouldn't taste very good. And I tried different combinations, and most of the time I wasn't very happy with them. So finally, I tried this combination of ingredients. And I think it was adding the walnuts into the batter that gave it this really nutty taste, and then having a little bit of the date sugar, a little bit of the flaxseed for thickness, and all of it kind of came together. And then I'm going to talk about the toppings here pretty soon, but I have a whole array of different things that we can put on top of the pancakes that are plant-based. And that really takes it over the top. Okay, I'm going to check one by looking underneath before I flip it over. Okay, I think this first one is ready to flip over. Now I have this cheap spatula, and the reason I picked this one is because it's really thin, and you need a thin spatula to get under stuff when there's no oil, because it has a tendency to be a little bit more difficult than, say, something that you are used to. So here we go. Okay, perfect. Nice and brown. It's dark brown, but not burnt. And it's stayed together. And the best part is it's done. This one looks like another winner. And you see what I'm doing before I flip it over? I'm not counting on the fact that it's just going to flip over because there's no oil on my griddle. So I'm going around the whole pancake before I flip it. And I'm going to also, before I flip it, I check underneath because these were put on last. So they're still kind of light colored. So I'm going to give them another minute. But it's important that you don't be so anxious, but loosen up the pancake all around before you flip it, because it may seem like, oh, I'm just going to flip it. It's all nice and loose, but it's only loose on that side. And then you start to flip it, and, you know, as you flip it over, it falls apart. So those are just the little tricks I've learned because I've made these many, many times. And what prompted me to do this particular video, okay, now this is giving me some problems because my spatula is not going all the way. So I'm going to get a little help from this blue spatula to hold it in place. Okay, perfect. I made these pancakes for breakfast last weekend. And I'm going to turn the heat down to about 325 now. It was about 360, 365 when I started because I wanted my griddle nice and hot. Because if you put the batter on a cold griddle, it's going to stick. Okay, so it has to, when the batter hits the pan, it needs to make that sizzle sound, okay? But then once you cook one side, then you turn it down because you don't want to burn your pancakes. So anyway, I made these pancakes for breakfast for my husband on Sunday of last week because he helped me with my cooking class on Saturday. And I was, you know, he loves pancakes with a ton of maple syrup. So I was trying to be nice. And I said, oh, Steve, I'll make you some pancakes. And I made these and I posted a picture of my pancakes. Well, all these people were like, where's the recipe? Where's the recipe? Where's the recipe? And I told them, well, the recipe's in my breakfast cookbook. Well, not everybody has a breakfast cookbook. So one lady, you know, kept asking, can someone please post the recipe? So I thought, you know what, this would be a quick and easy YouTube video. So I said, no, I'll just do it on my next YouTube video. So that's why I'm doing it today. So we won't make all of them right now. I'll make those later. But let's talk about our toppings and how we're going to plate this up. Move this out of the way. And like I said, I have several things. I have fruit is always good. because I'm trying to minimize the amount of sugary things that I use. So maple syrup is a form of sugar. So I typically use date syrup most of the time for everything. However, once in a while, I'll use a little maple syrup. So today for this demo, I'll use some maple syrup because it looks pretty. And then I can also use bananas, and I'll slice up some of this banana. I'll put bananas, blueberries, maple syrup, and top it off with a little bit of cashew yogurt and granola. How does that sound? Pretty good, huh? Cut the end of that banana off. It's kind of ugly. All right, so then got my granola. This is my homemade granola. I make this all the time. I did a YouTube video on granola, so you can find it easily. And then here's my yogurt. This is a Forager's plain cashew yogurt. And even though it's plain, it doesn't have has a little tiny bit, 1 gram of added sugar. It's very mellow. It's not sweet, but it's not so tart. So it has a really nice flavor profile, I think, because it's not too tart, it's not too sweet. And then last but not least, I had a plant-based retreat here on Saturday. It's an 8-hour retreat that I'm doing once a quarter, once every 3 months. And we made these oat sausages at my retreat. So I'm going to put those on the plate because they're a nice addition to your pancake meal. So I'll put about 3 of those on there. Don't they look like sausage? But they're not. They're made from oats and brown rice. And they're kind of chewy. So even though they don't taste like meat, which we're not trying to make things taste like meat, they have this, the spice profile in there is kind of like poultry seasoning or something. It's got the sage, rosemary, and all these different things that make it taste really, like what you associate with sausage. Okay, we'll make this look really nice. We'll make it with 2 pancakes. Now, normally I might just eat 1 pancake. I'm not that big of a appetite in the morning, but I'll put 2 pancakes on here, and I'll put some maple syrup. Kind of goes out on the plate. That's okay. And then what I like to put on there is a little bit of the granola. Let's use my hand here so it kind of sticks. So the granola makes it look like that hearty, nut and grain thing. And then I can put some of these, get a spoon, some blueberries. Here, let's put some of the yogurt so the blueberries have something to stick to. And then we can put some of our blueberries on here. Pile them in the top. And then I know it might be overkill to put the banana on there, but the banana is a sweet fruit. So I think it has a really good flavor. So a couple of slices of banana to me would be a nice addition to my big stack of pancakes. But you can put whatever fruit you have, like if you have strawberries or raspberries or anything you like. This is all customizable. Then we'll put a little bit more of this granola on it. Okay, so here we go. Here is our plant-based. I'm not going to take a giant bite of it today. But here's our whole food plant-based, no oil, nut and grain pancake. And it's got a little side of the oat and rice sausage, maple syrup, cashew yogurt, granola, blueberries, bananas, any fruit you want. It's going to be melt in your mouth, delicious, not chewy, and perfect. So I hope you make this nut and grain pancake recipe for your family. And I hope you watch my other videos here on YouTube. Please subscribe to my channel. You can also find me at my website, chef-julia.com, where I have all my classes listed. I have 1 whole food plant-based class every month. I also have a number of ebooks on there. I have a section on my website called Shop, where you can find over 40 classes that I've conducted on Zoom. So any kind of cuisine that you like, anything from Thai, Korean, Vietnamese, Japanese, pasta, comfort food, desserts. I've probably done a class on it. and they're all available for purchase on my website. So I hope you check there, and also hope you make this recipe. And if you do, post a picture of it and tag me in it. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. So thanks for watching. Bye-bye.